To the detectives, it was just another trash can that needed to be searched. But inside, nestled between coffee grounds and discarded mail, they found several crumpled pieces of paper. Once smoothed out under the harsh glare of an evidence lamp, the scrawled words revealed a script for murder. The instructions were chillingly precise. Wait for confirmation that he is alone, then turn off cell phones. Another line detailed how to avoid leaving evidence. Put duct tape on a second pair of shoes, so no tread prints. There were sketches of a property, notes on entry and exit points, and a final, cold instruction: dispose of clothes, plate, tracker, gloves. This wasn't a fantasy. It was a step-by-step guide to ending a man's life. How could one of the most vital clues in a homicide investigation be found simply sitting in the trash? And more importantly, who wrote it? Before the chilling discovery, there was a love story. It belonged to 25-year-old Patrick DeLaCerda and his fiancée, Jessica Devnani. They met on a dating app in June of 2017, and their connection was immediate. Patrick was described as a man who loved unconditionally and lived every day to its fullest. For Jessica, he was the center of her world. Their future was taking shape on a 9-acre property in Deltona, Florida. It was their sanctuary. Just 6 months after they met, Patrick proposed, and the two began planning their wedding. The symbol of that promise was a custom-made engagement ring that Patrick had designed himself. It was meant to be a surprise, the perfect start to their new chapter. But Patrick would never get to place it on Jessica's finger. The ring, a symbol of a bright future, would instead become a tragic emblem of a life stolen. On the very day he was expecting its delivery, his life was violently cut short. For Patrick and Jessica, a shadow from the past was lurking. That shadow was Gregory Bender, a 50-year-old former hedge fund manager and Jessica's ex-boyfriend. Their relationship had ended when Jessica discovered Bender was married, with no intention of leaving his wife. Heartbroken, she moved on and found happiness with Patrick. But here's the thing: Gregory Bender did not move on. Pleas to reconcile soon spiraled into a campaign of terror. The calls and voicemails became more frequent and more menacing. He saw Patrick as an obstacle that needed to be removed. The threats were specific and terrifying. Jessica recalled a conversation where Bender told her he would either hire a hitman to kill Patrick or do it himself. The harassment felt like a constant, menacing presence they couldn't escape. As Jessica would later say, "It's almost like he never left. Like he was shadowing my life." Fearing for their safety, the couple went to the law. They presented the threatening messages to a judge, who granted Jessica a restraining order against Bender in December 2017. He was ordered to stay away from her and surrender his firearms. For a few months, the threats stopped. A fragile peace settled over their life, and they allowed themselves to believe the system had worked. They thought he was finally gone. It was a fatal miscalculation. Tuesday, 27th February 2018, began like any other day. At work, Jessica Devnani's phone rang. It was a number she hadn't seen in months, but she knew who it was: Gregory Bender. He called twice. She didn't answer, but a knot of fear tightened in her stomach. After months of silence, she sent a text to Patrick to check in. When he didn't reply, her fear began to sharpen into panic. Around the same time, Patrick's father, Max, received a strange call from an unknown number. A man claiming to have a package for Patrick said he was outside the property's gate. Max tried to call his son, but Patrick never answered. Later, after hearing a recording of Bender's voice, Max would realize that the supposed delivery man was Gregory Bender, using a ruse to lure his son out. Unable to shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, Jessica left work. But she wasn't the first to arrive at the house. Max had asked his girlfriend, Shannon Chamberlain, to go check on Patrick. The scene she walked into was a nightmare. The front door was ajar, the glass shattered. And there, On the floor of his home lay Patrick DeLaCerda. He had been shot 4 times. When Jessica arrived just moments later, her world was shattered. My whole future was taken away from me, she would later recount. My whole world was taken away. When deputies from the Volusia County Sheriff's Office arrived, they entered a scene that was both tragic and perplexing. They swept the property, but the killer was long gone. Inside, they found Patrick, killed just inside his front door. It was clear to investigators this was no robbery. Nothing of value was taken. This was an execution. The forensics team began combing the scene for evidence. Near the shattered door, they found spent shell casings. But they weren't from a typical handgun. They were .300 blackout casings, a high-powered rifle ammunition often used in AR-15 style rifles. This told investigators the killer came prepared with a powerful, specific weapon. They also made another critical discovery. The hard drive from the home's security camera system had been ripped out and stolen. This was a clear move by someone who knew they were on camera and was desperate to erase any trace of their presence. It was the act of a methodical killer. When Jessica Devnani was able to speak with detectives, she gave them one name, Gregory Bender. While her testimony provided a prime suspect and a motive, investigators knew they needed hard, physical evidence to tie Bender to the crime. The investigation had a suspect, but the stolen security footage left a significant gap in the case. Then, the break came from a phone call made by a woman terrified for her own safety. The caller was Daimara Sanchoj, Gregory Bender's ex-wife. She told detectives a chilling story. Months before the murder, she had been at Bender's home and stumbled upon one of his spiral notebooks. What she saw inside made her blood run cold. She described finding what she believed to be a murder plan. In his own handwriting, Bender had detailed his dark thoughts. When she confronted him, he dismissed it as nothing more than a fantasy. She tried to put it out of her mind. But with the news of Patrick's death, that fantasy felt horrifically real. This was the bombshell lead investigators needed. Armed with this new information, they secured a search warrant for Gregory Bender's home. Executing the warrant, investigators descended on Bender's property. They were looking for the notebook, the murder weapon, and any ammunition matching the .300 blackout casings. As they searched, one investigator checked the trash cans. And there, right at the top of a bin, were the crumpled pieces of paper. They were holding the holy grail of the investigation. The notes laid out the entire plot in terrifying detail. There was a hand-drawn sketch of Patrick's property, marking roads and buildings. There were explicit, step-by-step instructions. Use a ruse, a package delivery, one note suggested, an eerie echo of the phone call Patrick's father received. The plan detailed how to avoid forensic evidence, including the note about putting duct tape on shoes. It also included a checklist for after the crime: dispose of clothes, plate, tracker, gloves. The most damning phrase was a simple command: wait for confirm that he is alone. This wasn't a fantasy, it was a premeditated plot. In his arrogance, Bender had tried to account for everything. Overlooking his own written plan was a critical mistake. The discovery of the murder plan was a massive breakthrough. Now, forensic experts had to scientifically link it, and the crime itself, directly to Gregory Bender. First, the handwriting. Forensic document examiners compared the notes to known samples of Bender's writing. They analyzed the slant of the letters, the pressure, the loops, and the spacing. The comparison left no doubt: Bender had authored the homicidal plot. Next, ballistics. The AR-15 rifle was never found. But during the search of Bender's home, they found .300 blackout rounds. More importantly, in a junk drawer, they found a single spent .300 blackout shell casing. Every firearm leaves unique, microscopic markings on a casing. Under a microscope, The casing from Bender's junk drawer was a perfect match to the casings recovered at the murder scene. This was the direct forensic link they needed. Finally, Bender's decision to steal the security DVR was, in itself, evidence of guilt. It proved he was covering his tracks. Investigators also found a burner phone on his property, a classic tool used to communicate without being traced, further proving premeditation. Bender had tried to erase his physical and digital footprints, but the trail he left was undeniable. In May of 2021, Gregory Bender went on trial for the murder of Patrick DeLaCerda. The prosecution laid out its case piece by meticulous piece: the chilling murder plan, the handwriting analysis, and the ballistic evidence. They painted a picture of a man consumed by jealousy, who methodically plotted to eliminate his rival. Bender's defense argued the writings were simply a fantasy, and that a person shouldn't be judged for their thoughts. The prosecution countered that Bender's actions turned that fantasy into a horrific reality. The emotional heart of the trial was the testimony from Daimara Sanchoj and Jessica Devnani. Standing just feet from the man who destroyed her life, Jessica told the court about the future Patrick had planned for them. "We were going to have the fairy tale dream and live happily ever after," she said. But this dream never became a reality because it was taken away by this man sitting in the courtroom today. After deliberating for only 2 hours, the jury returned with a verdict: guilty of first-degree, premeditated murder. Gregory Bender was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. If you'd like to see more in-depth explorations of complex cases, please consider like, comment, and subscribing to the channel. Gregory Bender crafted what he believed was the perfect murder plan. He was meticulous and forensically aware. He accounted for shoe prints, cell signals, and security cameras. But his scheme was undone by his own arrogance and one careless mistake: he forgot to take out the trash. The notes he wrote to guide his crime became the roadmap that led detectives straight to him. For Patrick DeLaCerda's family, the verdict was justice, but it could never fill the void left by his loss. In a bittersweet ceremony after the trial, Patrick's family gave Jessica the custom engagement ring he had ordered for her. She wears it today, a symbol not of a future that was stolen, but of a love that endures beyond death. It serves as a constant reminder of the incredible man Patrick was, and the life they should have had together.